Alright, so Cranky Motorsports here, again, doing a little bit more work on this 1969 Suburban. I have all the brakes and everything, all the dressing stuff back on this rear end. And I was going to do a time lapse. I'm probably still going to try to do a time lapse of me putting this thing back in, so everybody can see that it's not a scary nightmare getting this back into that. If you notice down here on the frame, there's 3 bolts right there. Those are really all that holds the rear end in, besides the 2 bolts that go in here. So you notice these 2 bolts are still in the frame. There's a bracket underneath here that connects in with these 2 holes in the top of the transmission. Leave the bracket on the frame when you take the transmission out. You take out those 2 7/16 bolts. That holds the front of the transmission in place, and then the 6 bolts on the back of it detach the brake stuff and the high-low lever. And if you still have the belt on there, obviously take the belt off. There's really not much more to it than that. What I was doing, drilling out the holes for the clutch, and this is an SS16 clutch. For you guys that always ask about the best way to repower a tractor, this is the best way to repower a tractor. So basically it replaces the whole clutch and battery tray that was in a Suburban 12 with an SS16 style clutch, which basically is the battery tray. What you're giving up by doing this is the gas tank, obviously, because there's only enough room for a battery there, but in most of my cases I put the gas tank under the seat or something else if I'm repowering these anyway. This is the SS16 front frame half, so I had to drill out this hole, basically right through the original frame into the SS16 frame, and then I had to drill out these holes which catch back here, these carriage bolts. Actually back here, sorry, the carriage bolts. I had to drill out the holes for that. So on this frame half I have basically 4, 5, like 6 bolts holding, well, after I put the clutch in, there'll be about 8 bolts holding the entire frame, the front half of the frame to the back of the tractor. So that's more than enough to hold it on there. So that's where I'm at right now. I was originally going to strip this thing down and do a really nice repaint job on it. Unfortunately, I have so many projects right now, I just want to get them up and running and driving, and then if I want to repaint them later, or if I hate the way I set the thing up, I can always sell it. So this one, if I sold it, I'd probably ask quite a bit, because I have gone through the whole rear end. That's a Positrack rear end now, and it's going to have quite a bit of work into it by the time I'm done. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and try to do a time lapse about putting the transmission back in. They're really not that hard. I mean, the hardest thing is just trying to manhandle the frame. And right now, because I don't have the front axle on the frame or wheels, and I don't have wheels on the rear end, it makes it a little bit harder. I like having wheels on the rear end, and I like having the front axle on the tractor, because you can kind of pivot the tractor back and forth and kind of set the transmission where you want it. But I'm going to go ahead and stop this for now, try to do a time lapse. Hopefully my camera won't shut off, and I'll come back in a little bit. So it only took me about maybe 15 minutes to put that rear end back in this tractor. Biggest thing is just making sure all these holes line up when you're putting it on. I had to loosen these 2 bolts up on the bottom of the frame so that I could shift the hitch plate in order to get these to line up and these to line up. The other trick is, usually when you take these bolts out, the threads pull out of the aluminum. Those bolts are only about 1 inch long usually. So these I use are about 1 1/4 inch, and there's usually enough meat in there to grab all the threads on that, so that these hopefully won't loosen up. Always make sure you put lock washers on them. This bolt has to be a short bolt, about 3/4 of an inch to 1 inch at most. And if you put a longer bolt in here, what happens is this bolt will actually hit the brake for the transmission, and the transmission won't spin. So doing the rear end's pretty easy. The last piece I have to put in right now is a cotter pin, which is what I have here, my lovely assistant helping me out here. And I'm going to push it in from the front and then bend it over from the back, so you can always push it out later. Actually, technically it's better to push it in this way, if I can get it in that way. Now, one thing I did forget with this when I put it together, I forgot to put the bolts for the seat spring in here, but I have a trick to get those in. If you take a piece of solid core wire like house wire, you can wrap it around a nut and fish it in from the bottom and then drive your bolt in from the top, and that'll work just as good as if you put a regular bolt in there. The only downside is when you take the bolt out, the nut falls out and you got to do it all over again, but for now it's okay. You see that? Thank you. Jake, stop.
What are they?
Your airsoft beads. Alright, so there's my cotter pin. What?
Hey, stand up.
Alright, there we go. There's my high-low, which works good. Shifter works good. So this transmission, when I redid it, I had some case gaskets in stock, so I was able to replace the whole case gasket. No sealant on that one, it's just a paper gasket. The shifter, there's a rubber boot underneath this shifter. There's a spring on the bottom of it with 2 washers. One washer goes on top of the spring, then the rubber gasket, then another washer, and then a cotter pin goes through to hold that on. You got to make sure you get the orientation correct, otherwise it won't quite line up when everything goes together. But all that stuff is put back together. So I got new seals on all that. And yeah, the hubs on this are all good now that I did all that work yesterday. This transmission, I'm probably going to end up filling it up with 80-90 gear oil. And I was one of those people that was always firmly against using gear oil. The reason I'm putting it in there is because after last summer, I spent a whole bunch of time looking at basically the viscosity of 30-weight motor oil versus 80-90 gear oil. And if you buy a good 80-90 gear oil like Lucas that has the stabilizer in it so that it climbs the gears, that's more than ample to put in these rear ends. I mean, there's so little in the rear end. I think part of the reason they wanted to use 30 weight is so when the seals start to wear out, it's not going to leak out everywhere. But 80-90 works just as good on these, and I'll probably take some flack for that, but it is what it is. I have so many of these tractors. Sometimes 80-90 is a little bit easier to find than 30 weight as well, which is another good reason to do it. I think Walmart, you can get about a gallon or a 5-quart jug of 80-90 for about $9 or $10. Works perfectly fine for this. So that's the transmission in this tractor. It was really simple to put it in. Next, I'm going to work on putting the front axle in so I can get some wheels on this thing and I can push it around the yard. So stay tuned.
Bye.
You guys are awesome.
Let's watch it.
So here's another pro tip from Cranky Motorsports. The original axle in these, how they get all this wobbly stuff in them, you can tighten down really tight on that frame piece, on that bolt right there, and squeeze it so that it doesn't do that. Or you can take a front axle from an SS16, has this extra bracket welded on here, and this actually takes up a lot of that slop. I don't remember if it was Bill the Tractor Man or one of those other guys, the old school guys from my tractor forum that told me that years ago. These axles work really good, and I have a new bolt, new-ish bolt, 5/8 to bolt on there. So I'm going to bolt that up and I'll get back with you guys. Alright, so this will be the end of this video. There's my little helper Jake. And basically what I got done, you saw me put the rear end in this thing. Not as hard as people think. Actually went really easily on this one. So the whole rear end in this thing is all set, and as you can see now, hey, spin that wheel. Pause-y. So both wheels turn at the same time all the time now. No more open differential. So that's one thing that's done. Clutch is done. All that stuff set up. I got to get a couple of springs. Whole front axles in. I just threw these tires on it, which actually are going on a different project, but I have matching tires to the back of this thing, but they need tubes. Actually, one or both of those need tubes as well. I got to work on that, but I got to order some tubes. I don't have any right now. So for now, that's where I'm at. Steering's done. Half done anyway. I still got to put the steering column and all that stuff back in, but I'm waiting for the dash to figure out what dash I'm going to use on this, and if I put the 69 steering wheel back on or if I put a different steering wheel on it, I'm not sure yet. So that's where I'm at with this thing. I'm still trying to debate whether or not I put a 10-horse Kohler in it, which I have, or an Onan, which I also have. Again, this is kind of a reminiscent project to the other 69 I had built a few years ago. That one had an Onan in it, which this one could have an Onan, but I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do yet. So that's where I'm going to finish off my video for today. I'm trying to get a little bit done at a time. This one, there's no real rush to get it done now. I'm fairly certain that Plow Day 2020 is going to get canceled. just looking that way. So what I'm trying to do is just pick away at it a little bit at a time and get it running. So I'm taking my time trying to figure out what I want to do on this thing, and we'll see where it goes. I was originally going to take all the time and strip it down to the, not the bare metal, but strip most of the paint off of it, clean it, and paint it as I put it together. But honestly, I have so many projects, like I said in yesterday's video, I have so many projects right now that I'm just trying to get a couple of them done and running so I can at least move them around, finish up a couple more, and then, you know, if I ever feel like taking it back apart and cleaning it up and repainting it, I will. Or I may just leave it all a bunch of different colors, because it is a mongrel, which is like, you know, a mutt dog that just has all different breeds built into it. So maybe I'll just leave it like that. I will check in with you guys later. Have a great day.
Bye.
Thanks for watching Cranky Motorsports. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.